Listen, man, that's the way it always should have been. You should always have, in any consultancy, you should have your experienced people doing the job, and you should have your next generation directly behind them, learning and riding along and directly observing what their experience. Because otherwise, like, you got people out there doing the job. You have people out there doing the job and doing it successfully every single day, and you're not using that as a learning opportunity for this very unique thing that you just can't learn on paper. You can't go to a class and learn how to do an agile transformation and be successful and get into fights and help other people see your way of thinking and your direction. That's not something you can get on paper.
No, absolutely.
You know, so if you're not putting somebody in that space to kind of help them and move along, you're missing a huge opportunity.
You're going to lose good people if you don't do that, right? At the end of the day. So.
Yeah. So I listen to, that's what I do in my free time when I'm not podcasting. I listen to other podcasts. It sounds boring in actuality. But in this instance, I actually, it was a very interesting listen. An interesting listen. I don't know.
Sure, that works. That's grammatically correct.
Yeah, theoretically. The discussion was about customizing Agile. Everybody customizes Agile, their implementation of Agile a little bit, and how much can you customize until you're just customizing your way out of being Agile at that point, you know. And the thing that hit home for this topic for me was the project teams that I just took over recently. When I took them over, I told you about this before we started, that when I took them over recently, one team had a retro on a calendar that was an hour long, and then my other team immediately had a retro on a calendar that was a half an hour long. And I'm like, guys, the team that had the half an hour retro, well, I don't know. I think they were about the same size, but they were large for Agile teams. They were large. They were like 10 people, I think, or 9 people. They were large for Agile teams.
So I'm assuming they both have equal sprint lengths and whatnot, right?
Yeah, they were all part of the same program.
Yep.
Yeah.
So one team is doing it one way, another team's doing it another way, and as far as customizing, I'm pretty sure that's all I've ever seen is customized Agile. You know, it goes from, this is what we learn as theory, but that's theory.
Yeah.
Right? So we're going to relent and say, we won't say it doesn't work here. We're going to try that, but we're going to change things about it. And we'll change this one thing, and we'll change this other thing. And over time, it goes from there to fragile Agile, as I call it, where it's not Agile. You're doing things that are not Agile, you know, doing multiple status reports because you did them before, and just because you're doing Agile doesn't mean you don't need them. In reality, you probably don't need them, as long as there's a way to inform those that need to be informed with what they need to be informed with. So I've seen that. I think that's all I've seen. I don't think I've seen a textbook implementation of Agile. Yeah. But that said, some level of customization can yield itself to be positive for the teams, where it's having a beneficial effect. That's fine. Then there's the other side of customizing Agile, right? Which kind of gravitates the teams towards being non-Agile, just for the sake, doing things for the sake of doing things, even though they're not really helping the teams.
The thing for me was the thing that I always see. The normal thing I always see about customizing is changing the length of events. That's the normal thing I see. So on for this team, it was cutting a retrospective down to somebody. I saw somebody arguing online recently about the Scrum guide doesn't prescribe lengths; it just recommends them. It says we recommend, can be this amount or shorter. I think there's some very specific terminology in the Scrum guide about the length of the events, but it gives a suggestion basically. And this team had more than cut that in half. One of them more than cut it in half. But I remember having a discussion with a product owner who was starting on a team, and that particular product owner, I don't want to single anyone out, that particular product owner said to me, on my previous team, I don't see a reason to have, God, I can't remember how long our sprint plannings were on that. It was a while ago. I think our sprint plannings were, we had an hour. I was a product owner on that team. I think I had an hour to come into the room and talk about what I wanted in the sprint, and then the team had like 2 more hours after that to break down each task or what I think. I can't. It was something like that. It was like 3 hour or or 2.5 hour block. I can't remember how. Maybe it was an hour and a half that the team had, and I remember it was an hour that I had to talk through each item. And sprint planning is 2 hours per week, so it was 4 hours were prescribed for the iteration, and we were not using 4 hours. We were using slightly less than 4 hours. But I remember the new product owner started, and the new product owner said to me, "Why? I don't understand why we can't get this whole thing done in half an hour." I was like, "Well, I don't know what your last team was doing, but I want the team to." I had to tell that individual, I want the team to go through every single item, look at all the acceptance criteria, write tasks, decide on how it's going to be tested, write the test cases. I want all that stuff written, because when the team tells me they're done, I want to go look through all their tasks and all their test cases, and I want to look through anything to make sure there's not any surprises that have come up, or if they have to come back to me and tell me they need to renegotiate the amount of time or the estimate they put on the story, because they realize it. I asked them to change one form, but changing that one form actually required them to do a bunch of, jump through a bunch of hoops in the database. And now it was going to turn from a 2-point story into a 8-point story. Whatever it was, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But if that's my number 1 or 2 item in the sprint that I want done, I need to know that you guys did a deeper planning, and then once you realized, or maybe nobody realized how much testing was going to happen. That comes up, that happens a lot. But apparently that's the thing. The product owner kind of breezing into the team and being like, figure it out, and then breezing out in 15-20 minutes, and then just magic happening, apparently.
Well, in particular with scale teams, I've seen that where you have multiple teams doing their sprint planning on the same day, especially if they're on a unified cadence. The product owners basically time slicing across the teams. So they'll pop in, spend a few minutes here, a few minutes over there, and they're not done. Is it ideal? No. You better have some strong BAs that have already worked with the product owners, who have some of the answers. They may not have all the answers, but as long as they have some of the answers, we can park it. In my last program, we kind of did it that way, where the product owner would come in and just talk about high-level sprint goals that they were looking for, and then the teams would ask any dependency-type questions if they had any, and then the product owner would leave, go to another team, while the team continues looking through each item. When the product owner came back later in, because it was a 4-hour for a 2-week, when they came back, any questions that had arisen during the time they were away are raised. And the team did their best to task out as many things as they could, but they didn't finish every time tasking everything out. That was okay. They would then go away and start working on the ones that they had tasked out, and other people would then look at this is a team that actually swarmed on work. So nobody was assigning work to anybody. They would volunteer and say, I'm going to take this one. Somebody else say, I'll help you with that, including testers. So that was really nice. And anything that wasn't tasked out would be tasked out by the end of the day or the next day. That's fine, because nobody is really looking for that, that task burn down to start on that day. It would start the next day. But that worked really well. At the end of the day, everybody felt a common sense of ownership. So at the stand-ups, people would be looking at stuff and saying, hey, I worked on this yesterday. I'm kind of thinking I need help on this. And people would say, well, I can help with that. So as a Scrum Master, you don't have to do anything there, which is great. But it's a bit of a luxury too, because I haven't seen that too often.
Yeah, I think the other problem I run into with customization is confirmation bias. The confirmation bias in my instance, meaning I remember we brought in, I don't remember what his job title was, delivery lead or program lead, or I don't remember what his job title was, but basically when he came in, I'm trying to remember what the situation. This was a while ago, so this is real foggy in my brain. When he came in, I'm trying to think of what the first event he changed was. I think it was the sprint planning. I think he was, we only need an hour for sprint planning. The entire thing, start to finish. I think that was the first thing. Mm-hmm. Well, he obviously didn't understand that the team had to generate tasks and stuff like that, and he wasn't a developer. He was more like project manager type of
Yeah.
So he didn't really understand exactly what was involved in sprint planning, but it didn't matter because the team would figure it out and take care of it for him. Even though he wasn't involved in that part of sprint planning, the team would just kind of figure it out.
Sure.
So it generated some extra work on the team's behalf. But from what he understood of sprint planning, the part that he was involved in, he would come in for an hour, kind of talk through what was involved, and then he'd kind of bounce out, and he thought sprint planning was over at that point.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, maybe it was over for him.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no, it was. Well, what happened in that project was as the team went on during the sprint, they would constantly go back through little mini refinements, and because basically the activities that you do in 1 4-hour session of doing a deep dive on every single work item and figuring out how to implement it and exactly how you're going to implement it and how you're going to test it. And what tables are involved, what programs are involved, what other teams you need to talk to, who the team leads are, what architect worked on what, you know what I mean, where the repos are, what they affect, all the deep dive stuff you have to figure out how to actually do something. They didn't figure it out on the sprint planning day. They just slowly figured it out every day as that item came up. So the team paid for that planning time. They just didn't pay for it until they actually picked the task up.
Right. But they probably paid more.
They absolutely paid more, because what you would get is you'd have, instead of the whole team looking at the planning at one time together, one person would look at one piece of the planning, and then another person would look at another piece of the planning. Maybe a developer would pick it up and try to start working on it without anyone else, and they didn't realize. So yeah, it's if you had a whole team that basically didn't plan and just picked the next item Kanban style. But even a Kanban team plans, they trigger some kind of like refinement that puts items on their board. They kind of know what they're going to work on. Yeah, it's like if you didn't do that at all. But because he did that on one of his other teams, just like that product owner that I was referencing, because that product owner did that on one of their other teams, they had that bias that every team then could only needed a half an hour to plan. I have no idea even what that team's side was. Maybe that team was 3 people or 4 people, and they can get through a deep refinement. Listen, I had a team that was 3 people, and that those people had been together for 8 years. Now, 8 years over the course of the entire program. So the team was much larger at one point, and then those are the employees left over time when the team got a lot smaller.
Right.
However, those team members had worked on that product for 8 years. They didn't need much refinement at all. Anything you brought to them as a feature, they knew exactly where everything was. They knew exactly what pieces to test, exactly what needed to be coded. Every single one of them knew the database inside and out, testers and developers. And they didn't need to spend a bunch of time on refinement. They knew. So that team, I believe, a half an hour, all they needed. So maybe that product owner had a team like that.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, but the teams were not like that. The teams at that point were not like that. So that person was coming in with a bias and didn't understand that every team is different. I need to look at every team. Let me dial everything back. And kind of start with a by the book kind of approach, and then kind of figure out where they differ from by the book.
Yep.
I almost don't even want to say by the book, because there's so many people out there saying, just figure it out, figure out what works for you.
I think it's degrees. How much detail do you go down to when it comes to following the textbook for agility? Every team's different in terms of their level of maturity, Agile-wise, and in terms of their capacity to uptake the new way of working. So there's a lot of factors into it, but I do think that there's some fundamentals they have to get right. There could be little pivots here and there, but if you're going to change some key things, you're no longer Agile. And at that point, you've got to question, is the change worth it? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very real thing. Customizing your way out of being Agile. I most recently was dealing with this with a bunch of project managers who retitled themselves as Agile delivery managers or Agile delivery leads. I have no idea what the actual job titles were, but they have stand-ups and they have this and that. But I mean, it's all just rebranding. That's all it is. Just rebranding. They're not actually Agile. They've rebranded, and their leadership has come down and says, "Hey, you're going to be Agile now," and they change their status meetings to say stand up, and now they're Agile.
Yeah. Everybody wants to be agile, but nobody wants to really kind of do the hard work that it takes to get there. This is a bigger conversation we can have another time about agile transformation. People want it, they want it given to them on a plate, and they don't want to do the hard work.
Yeah. That is a conversation for a different time. The other thing that I would like to spend some time talking about inside of customizing Agile is because I also ran into a situation recently where I'm coupled with project managers who have gone out to find themselves technical leadership to couple with, who also don't believe in cross-functional teams. So I wanted to touch on cross-functional teams for a minute. So cross-functional teams versus feature teams, right? So the issue I ran into is because my teams are component teams. I don't even know what I just said. Component teams. Yeah, feature teams. Because my teams are component teams, meaning these guys can only work on the database, and these guys can only work on the front end, and these guys can only work on the back end. What I end up having to do is I have to take my roadmap items and I have to split them. I have to split the business functionality of my features, my high level things that I want from the business. I have to split them into components that can be knocked out by one single team, because the team doesn't have the skill to completely implement the feature. And what that has led to is, now if you're to look at the stories in the backlogs across all the teams across the program, because there's several teams, it's like 4 or 5 teams, you'll be clueless. You'll have no idea what anyone's working on, right? Because the features have been broken up by team, basically. So they're not segments of business functionality anymore.
Yeah, that's one of the downsides of a component team is you're building bricks. It's almost like having, if you're building a home, it's almost like having just the people that lay the bricks, right, go ahead and do their stuff separately from other people. So people that are laying the groundwork for where the plumbing's going to go, the electrical circuits are going to go, the wiring and all of that. They don't talk to each other, right? And so there's different backlogs in many cases too, which is horrendous, really, because you don't really know where things are at. The focus is just on that micro level, and you lose the bigger picture. Yeah. A classic kind of example of that, I guess it's a little extreme, but it's a real example. When they built the tunnel across the English Channel, it was decided that the work would be split between the French and the British. So the French started digging on one side, the Brits started digging on the other side, and the idea was, we got this, we know the technology, we're going to meet in the middle. Well, it didn't quite work out that way. So even today, as we speak, the tunnel is not a straight tunnel. Yeah. They never met exactly in the middle. It was off by a bit, and it doesn't need to be a large amount of offset, because you're a long way down underwater with all that hydrostatic pressure. Anyway, the long story short, they missed. So they had to put a little jig in there, right, to kind of move. Yeah. And you can't just do that, so they have to backtrack a little bit and then put a longer jig in, so the cars, etc., have or the train has enough room to maneuver. So that's it. Just talks about that granular focus, right, and not keeping an eye on the bigger picture.
I don't quite get it, man. To be honest, I don't quite get the allure of feature teams.
Look, component teams, they do it because it's convenient.
Oh yeah,
right? And then the other thing is it's based on the skill sets available, right? You've got a database person, that's all they're gonna do, so you put them in charge of that stuff, and that's what they do, and they're gonna go off and do it their way. Yeah. Now they're not gonna talk to people. It used to be when we had, in the early days of the 3-tier architecture, those guys in the middle that were doing the middleware stuff didn't talk to anybody. Yeah. They said, well, this is what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to see from the database. Here's what we're going to feed to the front end, right? And it caused havoc. Yeah. And I think we're, to a certain degree, not free from that yet. Feature teams, on the other hand, if they're stood up with the right structure, they can work, but you have to still take care of the overall product, right? Which is a summation of all the features that there. Otherwise, you could have feature disparity, right, within the product, where something shines and something is perhaps not so good.
Yeah. You know what I was going to bring up? This is a product management segue, product owner type of segue from this topic. I thought about this one earlier today when I was kind of brainstorming for topics. The feature teams versus component teams, it really shifts. Let me think about what I really want to say for a second, because I expected this battle with my teams, because I just put together a plan today to change my teams from component teams over to feature teams, and one of the pieces of ammo that I was going to use in the fight to help switch teams over was, we can stay component teams, but that means that our features coming from our roadmap are not going to be clear, and it's going to look disjointed to leadership of what we're working on. They're not going to get they're never going to get a clear picture. The product ownership's going to have to work real hard to send the clear picture about what we're working on, because they're not going to be able to just look at the backlog, because everything's going to be broken up by component. With feature teams, it'll be very clear, because you'll send a feature through, and at a high level the feature will come through, and the feature will get broken into stories, and those stories can get divided across teams, one or more teams depending, it doesn't really matter, and they can implement the feature at the same time. A couple teams can combine their work, do the feature and get it out and get it done in half time, or maybe not. Maybe a couple different features maybe a couple different teams work on different features, and now you're doing parallel work. Doesn't really matter. But the where I was gonna take it back to my product owners to kind of help me in this was, if you guys go the route of component teams, we're basically going to need the team to do the planning we all need to be in the same room to do the planning, because when you go up with your piece of the component, this other team needs to go up with their piece of the component in order for us both to satisfy the features at the same time, because otherwise team A in this sprint puts the database piece of the component in, and then the next sprint team B picks up the user interface piece, and then we don't get to go to production until maybe the next sprint. So instead of just one sprint, we just get a piece of the UI done, a piece of the full slice of functionality done. Now we got to wait 3 sprints and to give you honestly, to even give you a demo of what it's going to look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So to that point, I think if you're just working on components, it might even be harder for the product owner, product management team to deliver anything useful to the end users, right? And yeah, it will take longer.
Yeah.
Where have we seen this before, where people build just the UI piece because they're ahead of it and the database stuff isn't ready? So what they do is, we're just going to have mock data, right? We don't have real data because, well, guess what? The data team hasn't got their act together yet. We don't have all that ETL work done. We don't have the data, the actual data. So we'll just mock it up, right? We'll just stuff some data in some JSON files and read those, and we'll just stitch it up together when the data is available. But what do you deliver to the user that sprint? You don't deliver anything that's usable, right? You give an illusion of progress there by saying, well, the front end's done. What can I use though? Well, not yet, because it's just mock data. Yeah. You can go look at the drop down, but that's not real.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if we just want the illusion of progress, sure, have at it. But you're not delivering value.
Yeah. Let me get all the back end done, and then let me get the front end done, or let me get whatever done. Yeah, it's just waterfall.
I think that's right. It is waterfall. So that's talking to that whole, that first topic we started with, right? Customizing Agile. You think you're working in an Agile way, but you're really not.
No, well, you're just rebranding Waterfall, and you say, I have Agile teams. We are Agile now. Here's but the first team is just doing the first line of the Gantt chart, and the second team is picking up the second line of the Gantt chart, and you've rebranded Waterfall. Congratulations. Nobody recognized it, but no, you've customized. You haven't even customized Agile at that point.
You just renamed Waterfall.
You just rebranded Agile. You just rebranded Waterfall, and you've pulled the sheet over the head of all the project managers or all the leadership and everybody who's like, do Agile.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're now doing Water Scrum or Fall.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Congratulations. You got away with it.
Look at all the story points we're delivering.
Look at those story points.
Can't use them, but hey.
They're great. Yeah, they're great. A cross-functional team. The part that we should really need to get somebody who's a developer in the room to go over this too, because I'm really somebody with a lot of development experience too. You know what I mean? I need to hunt around maybe on LinkedIn for people I know in the area that are directors of development or, you know what I mean, managers in development, because I really want to understand. I see this a lot from developers who are at a management level in the organization. Believe it or not, I know quite a few developers who know that you peer program, you get better code. You know what I mean? You bring your testers in while you're coding, you get better code, you get better quality, basically. The people that are dedicated to quality of their code, they don't have a problem with this. But I have worked with many developers who they are dead set on all my back end guys on this team, all my front end guys on a front end team, and my front end team does nothing but builds forms and, you know, whatever all day long, and they do not want to be convinced otherwise, you know.
Do you think part of it is just because those skill sets are also very much siloed, right? You have people that can just write reports and people that can just do store procedures or whatever. So I don't know if that's really why, but I have a feeling that might contribute to it.
I don't know, man. I don't get it. I feel like now I'm venturing into a segment of the conversation that is outside of my skill sets. I don't understand it because I don't know about it. You know what I mean? I haven't worked as a entry to mid-level developer, so I don't understand. Why would the goal not to be to get yourself to be a full stack developer? You know what I mean?
Right.
The more you understand about, let's say you develop in I'll use LAMP stack because that's when I was a freelance developer. That's the development stack I developed. That I'm kind of dating myself by saying LAMP stack, but that's the PHP 7. Yeah, PHP 7. That's the code base that I developed in, and I was already a SQL expert before I started developing it in PHP. So I guess I didn't have to go figure out how SQL worked. But then when I remember being an automation engineer, I remember I worked with a bunch of mobile developers, and they were allergic to SQL because they would call an API, and they'd get something back from the API, and I would ask them all the time, "How are you sure what you're getting back from the API is correct? Just go to the database and go look at what you should be getting." And they're like, "Well, I don't mess around with SQL. I don't know anything about the SQL. SQL's the easy. You're already developing a whole application on iOS. You're already writing in Swift. Like SQL should be the easiest thing you work on, man.
There's only 12 SQL things to remember.
It's not that difficult." But yeah, those guys they were just allergic to it. They didn't want to touch it. They didn't know anything about it. And I don't know. I would think if I were a senior developer or somebody in charge of supervising or hiring developers, you know, basically in charge of junior devs, you know, helping them kind of move along with their career, I would want them to venture into other areas. The different technologies that you're involved in, I would think it just makes you a better coder, you know, technologist. I don't know a word to use in this instance. I don't know. It's very strange to me.
It is odd, isn't it? Yeah, maybe we should try and get somebody like that on the podcast. That'd be good.
Yeah, I think so. You know, the other side of this conversation of why I'm kind of saying I'm not really sure, because I don't know the pressures on developers. The pressures on developers are very different than the pressures on, for example, a Scrum Master or even a QA person on their team, or, you know, a BA. The pressure on developers is completely different. Pressure on developers is just get it coded as fast as possible, you know, and get it out as fast as possible. You know, which is not that's why I had such a big gripe. Wow, we're really way off, and I don't even know what we wanted to start talking about. But the pressure on the developer is get it coded and get it out as fast as possible. The pressure on the QA person on the team is make sure it works the way it was designed and it doesn't blow anything else up. Yeah, you know, which is kind of the more you work on Agile teams, and the more you understand the way that it's supposed to work, you kind of understand that that's not really the way it's intended. The quality shouldn't just be some dude's job at the end of the line. You know what I mean? It should be that person should be involved the whole way, and they should be kind of your subject matter expert helping you along. You know, I don't know, man. There's a lot. I've dealt with a lot of territorialism on this subject. You know, who owns what and that kind of stuff. This goes back to what we talked about earlier. Is who has the expertise. They feel that the more expertise they have, they feel more ownership of that. They don't want to be told that they need to include somebody else in their area of expertise.
Yeah, I think largely it comes down to the culture of the organization. Are they going to promote, pair programming, mob programming even, right? Mm-hmm. So people can just look over everybody's shoulders. Somebody's going to pick up something, right? And it results in a better product. But, flip side of that, leadership don't understand that. Why are two people needed to do one person's job? What about mob programming? They're not going to accept that, right? Because they don't get it. So I think that's one of the challenges.
Yeah, even that's a little bit crazy because, even that's a little bit wild to me, because you don't look at a plumber or an electrician and say, well, why do you need two people? When you have an apprentice electrician,
right,
and a electrician, a journeyman or a senior electrician, you don't look at it and be like, why would I put this person with you? Well, you're putting the person with them so they can learn the trade and they can be supervised by somebody who knows how to do it. It's very obvious, and all trades do that. Why would development be any different?
Yeah.
Well, it's the quality of your code. I would argue it exactly is the same concept as a bricklayer or a plumber or an electrician. They are writing code that's going to be there and it's going to serve a purpose for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you not want somebody experienced looking over their shoulder, and kind of trading off back and forth on the keyboard? What's your excuse for not doing that?
Well, it's this misperception of waste of money, because now you've got multiple people and you're only getting one thing done when you could be getting 4 things done. That's
I don't know,
that's
man.
a fallacy.
I don't know, man. I think 20, 30, 40 years from now, like, maybe the industry will have a completely different view of this subject. I think we're applying an outdated concept of managing work to knowledge work. For example, if you're I'm getting real meta with this topic. We're way out there, man. I'm definitely not qualified to talk about what I'm talking about now, so take this with a grain of salt, internet. If you're a worker working on an assembly line and you're doing your one job, putting lug nuts on a wheel, attaching a wheel on an assembly line, there's one perfect way to do that.
Yep.
All right? You're building something. There's one perfect way to do that. You're assembling car, you're building furniture, you're doing whatever. There's one perfect way to do that. You're figuring out how to code a feature. I mean, you could argue there's one perfect way to do that, but once your requirements change, or once your user wants something slightly different, or once your user sees a finished product and wants you to change it a little bit, that you can't really follow the same methodology of saying, I'm gonna put one person in the chair and they're gonna do it this way, and then I should be able to sub literally any person out and they'll do it the exact same way. That if you're trying to manage your development team that way, you're doing something dangerous, man. That is not that theory doesn't even hold up. I'm trying to contradict myself while I'm speaking the words. I'm trying to think of like.
Well, I don't know if this is going to help. I think 10 years from now, there'll be somewhat of a change in the way people are working today. 30, 40 years from now, you're going to have bots building stuff. You have bots building software. So as far as this idea of inefficiency, because you have more than one bot working on the same thing, that just goes away.
Yeah. Right?
Because it's so much cheaper with these machines doing it. But people have to accept that instead of building more of them, they're building a better product. And that mind shift isn't there, among those traditional managers that grew up with this whole Taylorism concept, that they implemented at work, right?
Man, you said Taylorism. We're definitely off the deep end in this topic.
I'm gonna have some coffee now.
Man. Oh man, let's get deeper into the French. I can go where you're going with this, but we're gonna lose everybody on the internet.
Let's not do that.
I am all for a deep discussion on Taylorism. And German production and engineering practices of the late 1800s, early 1900s. Oh my goodness. I don't even know what we're talking about anymore.
No,
We started on
I
cross-functional
think
teams.
I've derailed us pretty well.
We went down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Oh man, even Taylorism is outdated.
Oh, of course.
I mean, it wasn't Taylorism swept away by the Industrial Revolution. It was all that stuff kind of like got kicked off to the side because the Industrial Revolution came in and said, this is how to mass produce things and work on the assembly line, and this is how to train workers or whatever. And
Yeah, to a degree, and you know, but the Industrial Revolution propagated this idea that with a production line, you know, one person does only one thing,
Yeah.
right? And they keep doing it.
Yeah.
And if they see something that's going wrong, it's not their job. They're going to get their part right. That's it.
Right.
And somebody at the end of the production line is going to inspect for quality.
Right.
This is where, you know,
kick
TPS
it
came
over
in
the
and
fence. Kick it over the fence.
kick it over the fence. Yeah, exactly. So this is where Taiichi Ono came in and said, empower anyone who sees something going wrong to pull
Yeah.
the chain, right?
Yeah.
But we don't want to talk about that topic now because we'll take the rest of the day
Oh
doing
man,
it.
no! I'm in for this topic now. We're over 30 minutes in. It's time to burn some time. Thank you, viewers, for sticking around this long. We're gonna talk about the French aristocracy. No, there was a. This is concepts of classism and all kinds of other stuff coming at this point because you had the laborer class and you had the owner aristocracy. I don't know what the other class was. Basically, the class that knew the learned class, the scholarly class. I don't know what it was, but the class that basically we know how to do everything. You're just a laborer. You know what I mean? We'll tell you what to do.
It was the management class.
Yeah.
They'd never done the work, but they knew how to do it.
Right. Well,
they'll tell you how to do it.
These are the seeds of command and control.
Absolutely.
I'm shocked that 200 years later, command and control is still. This is the way to do knowledge work. You don't even know what you're trying to accomplish,
right?
Until you start trying to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't do that on an assembly line. Don't know what you're trying to do until the assembly line starts running. That is it would be impossible to run an assembly line that way, where you don't know what you're assembling until the line starts moving.
Imagine that.
I can't imagine. I feel that's every day at certain projects.
I can relate. Believe me.
Oh man, I feel like I should have done research on this topic. Taylorism, man, that's gonna be the episode title. Taylorism and other esoteric topics.
I don't know if we're gonna get anybody watching that one.
French and German history. Oh man, we can go super deep into this one about the.
We can probably segue from there to the flow system or something.
Until to. Yeah, I mean we can go anywhere.
But coming back to where we started with.
Uh-oh. If we can.
If we can, yeah. What was it again?
Well, we started with customizing Agile. That's what we started with.
That's right.
We started with customizing Agile because I wanted to start with customizing Agile because that's a common thread through my career is the normal pushback will be, well, that won't work here.
Right.
Right. Retrospectives won't work here because the management needs to decide that they want to change something. A team can't tell management they need to change something.
It kind of that customization though feeds on itself. So I've been at organizations where you recommend something that you know they need, and somebody says, we tried that here a couple of years ago, it didn't work. That was that Agile thing we tried a couple of years ago, right? It didn't work here. Yeah. So why would we try it again, right? And you're like, well, how did you try it? What did you do? Did you do it right? Is that the only thing you did, right? And there's a plethora of questions, but it feeds on itself. So the internal microculture that at that organization gets bought into this idea that it doesn't work here. Yeah. It's not for us, right? So what do? Here's what I mean by feeds on itself. Well, because it doesn't work here, why don't we just tailor it so that it does work for us? Yeah. So they change something, then they change something else. Yeah. Before you know it, you're in this thing what I call fragile Agile. It's only Agile in name, and that's it. Yeah. Right.
Well, how did they? That's the thing that kind of blows my mind is that why would they even start? Why would they even start? They're going to pick up Agile. And I'm assuming they're going to pick up a methodology. They're going to pick up SAFe, or they're going to pick up something else. In one of my early experiences, the company picked up SAFe. I think they had I honestly don't know. I wish I knew more about this. I'd be able to speak a little more educated to that specific experience. But I was like just a worker in that organization. But I think what happened was an SPC or somebody came in and sold the leadership team safe training. You know what I mean? And they got all the leadership whipped up about, oh, this is the way to do your organization, or whatever. And the organization was one team. They had one single team. I'm like, you know,
how are they doing safe with one?
They were convinced. All the leadership had the little safe diagram. They had the little laminated safe placard, and they were real proud of. We're gonna do this, and we're gonna have a release train, and we're all gonna get on the train, choo choo.
Train with one bogey.
A train, yeah. and that, I mean, it didn't. It was a train. It was a train wreck. Oh man, I didn't mean to make that pun, but it just happened. Yeah, it was absolutely terrible, and everyone got a bad taste in their mouth for SAFe, which I feel probably happens a lot. That's probably one of the reasons SAFe is such a bad rap with a lot of people, is people just have real crappy implementations of SAFe.
Yeah, that initial experience makes or breaks it, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, the other reason why people get that bad taste in their mouth is it's just not implemented right, or it's implemented right mechanically, so to speak, right? But it's implemented in the wrong culture. This is akin to, you know, you're going to plant a little plant somewhere, right?
Yeah.
A little seedling, but you don't have the right soil. You don't have that. So it doesn't work, but that doesn't make the seedling bad.
Yeah.
In the right environment, it will thrive, right? And so if the culture isn't amenable to implementing SAFe, but you try and force feed that, it's not going to work. And we've seen that before.
Yeah. Customizing your way out of being agile. I don't know. There's two situations. There's a situation where you are agile and you customize your way out of it, and there's a situation where you never were agile in the first place.
Right.
You know, the program that I sort of pseudo took over. Sorry, I got these guys blowing me up. I gotta find out what's going on. All right, sorry. Let me pause the recording. Go. Yeah, what was I going to talk about? Customizing Agile. Customizing Agile. Yeah, the program that I took over had been implemented by a team of people that I knew all the people on the teams that implemented the program, and they set up a Scrum Scale program, and I am certain that they set it up the correct way. And then when I came on as a Scrum Master 3 years later, I'm not really sure. My experience was walking in was just bewilderment. I don't understand how you guys have component teams and how you don't understand your ceremonies are all that zombie Scrum kind of, you know, events where you guys are just phoning in. I don't understand. I don't understand how this happened.
They adopted Agile.
I think they did. Well, I mean, in that instance, project managers had come in at the leadership level and kind of, you know, they didn't really understand what was happening, or that's not true. I suspect what happened was project managers came in at the leadership level and they did not feel that they were in control. I suspect that is what happened. They did not feel they were in control, so they exerted their control with, you know, turning the stand-ups into status meetings and, you know.
Yeah, I've seen that happen also in organizations that have, you know, PMOs, because that's what they used to do, and it's a hard habit to break. So yes, we're going Agile, but we're going to still continue to do what we were doing before, statuses and, you know, status reports in triplicate, all of that good stuff, right? It is tough. It is tough. I'm particularly proud, though, that over a long period of time, I haven't done status reports. I'd rather set up a dashboard in the ALM tool,
right,
and send them a link. That way, I don't fight this idea where I spend some time, you know, creating a status report, send PDFs out on Friday or something, and nothing happens. So you think, okay, you know, silence is acceptance, right? But it's not, because Monday or Tuesday of the next week, somebody's going to ask you about something you raised as a risk or an impediment in your status report, which was true at the time when you wrote it,
Right.
but then you did your job and you fixed it,
Yeah.
right? And 2-3 days later, they're saying, well, hey, how's that going, right? You know, and you're like, it's done, it's finished. So I got tired of having to go through all of that just to explain. And then they get into the minutiae. What happened? So does it matter?
Yeah.
It's done. No, what happened? How did you fix it? We want to know.
Yeah.
Next time it happens, can somebody else, when you're not around, fix it?
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, document it.
Yeah.
Right? So now I just put it all on the dashboard. It's still being fully transparent. Actually, it's better because it's current. So I don't know when they're going to open my PDF, if they're going to open it.
Mm-hmm.
But if every time they hit the dashboard, it is current, they can hit that dashboard and close their eyes. I can't help that. But I did my part. Here's the status. It's live. It's current, right? And if you want to scream now.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah, it saves me a lot of time because once you invest a bit of time and create those dashboards, you can sit back, right?
Yeah.
All you have to do is just simply make sure that the work items on the dashboard are current.
Mm-hmm.
And that's your coaching to the teams, is just make sure bad news, good news, share it right now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's also the way that I generally escape getting involved in status. I normally status to me, what that signals to me is that usually somebody at leadership level is not getting the understanding that they need of where the project is at, and that just means build better dash. But you got to work with those guys one-on-one with what exactly do you want to see, you know.
Yeah, you never know that going in. So you make a start,
no, I
right?
didn't,
And then you let them tell you, can we get this on the dashboard?
Yeah.
Can we get that? When I hear that, I'm very encouraged because I know at least they're looking at the dashboard.
Mm-hmm.
So I just give them what they want it to, to the degree I can.
Yeah.
So yeah, entertain them, just give them what they're looking for and encourage that habit, that is their status update, not some PDF file that comes in a mail.
Right. Yeah, that's been a huge source of contention with me when I get coupled with leadership is reporting status of where multiple teams are at with the roadmap, and they usually will look at the status of something in order to try to do a forecast. They're really looking at where something's at today to try to forecast where something will be tomorrow. You know what I mean? That's really what they're looking at it with the perspective of, which isn't really, I don't know. I don't know if that's the best way to look at a dashboard. Dashboard's a current snapshot.
It is.
Yeah.
But you can show trends.
You can
right?
show trends. Yeah, you can
And
show
then
trends.
people
You can
can
show progress too. You can show progress
You
too.
can, and they can extrapolate the trend
Yeah.
if they want.
Yeah.
Right? That's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I sorry, I'm getting blown up over here. But whether they want to see, whether they want to come in every day and see a progress bar and make sure the progress bar is not the same as it was yesterday. Sometimes that's all that they need. You know what I mean? Is it 74% yesterday? Is it 78% today? Okay, good. It's made progress. That's fine. But I had a team once. Wow, I'm really stretching now for this type of stuff. I had a team once that I think the program was 3 teams. Maybe 5. I can't remember how many it was. It was like 3 to 5. I don't remember how many it was. But the leadership, we had a PMO in that instance. So we had a program management, not a project management. Yeah. We had a PMO in that instance, and the program management always wanted to know what's the status of what you've implemented as it relates to all the work we want to get done. I don't understand what all the work. You don't even know what all the work you want to get done is. How can I even tell you that?
Right.
I'm just along with my 2-3 teams here. I can't tell you what all the work for the entire future of, they had like 2 years worth of work planned. That when I say planned, I mean a roadmap level. We want to get this, and then we want to get feature A, then we want to get feature B, then we want to get feature C. Actually, this is an epic level. So it'd be like, we want to open a branch office in Chicago, and then we want to open a branch office in New York, and then we want to open a branch office in San Francisco. Well, what is opening a branch office? Like how many people are going to be in that office? 50 people? 100 people? 3,000 people? What does that mean? Oh, well, we don't know. We'll figure that out when we get closer to the deadline. Yeah, okay. Well, then why are you asking me? I'm just working on my teams, man. Once we get closer to it, then we'll figure that out. But yeah, they always press the team level resources for that kind of stuff, rather than just saying we have a roadmap, we'll get there eventually, and
I think sometimes they're worried about the budget for that sort of program too, right?
Yeah.
It's like if they don't use it, they lose it.
Mm-hmm.
Those sorts of factors play into it as well.
Yeah, I could easily see a lot of it coming back to budgeting. I do have to say, after my current experiences going back to a larger program, I'd like to our budgeting conversation at some point, because now I have a much clearer picture of, if you fund it like a project if you fund it like a traditional project where once a year you're going and begging for your funding and say, I request $20 million, and they say, well, we'll only give you 14, make it work. Yeah, that's probably not the best way to fund an Agile team or project or product. It's probably not the best way to fund a product.
Well, if you can't go back to the well again for more money, what it tends to do is encourage you to ask for 30 million when you need 20, because you'll only get 18.
Yeah.
It's just human nature.
Yeah, but you're selling used cars at that point.
Of course.
I'm just going to start with a high number, and then
that's totally the case.
Man, this is probably I could very easily take the other side of this argument to say, well, that's just human nature. You just got to learn that's just the way business works.
Yeah, well, that's the way it's been working for decades, right? And it ain't working too well. So we've got to find some other way, whatever that is.
I mean, buying a feature, if you have a cadence and you know how much it takes to buy a feature, and you know how fast your team implements features, you generally should be able to say, I want to take that money that it takes to buy those features, and I want to do twice the amount. So I need to basically double what I pay for this, or 1.5 if I want to deliver 50% faster. That should be the way that kind of stuff is managed. It should be managed based on what is the outcome that we're trying to get to. Well, we want to deliver 75% more features next year. Okay, no problem. Let me look at what the team costs, and I'm going to spin up an extra 75%. I'm going to throw an extra 75% money at the team, or another team of 0.75 size, whatever it would be, or 0.75 more teams. I don't know what the scale of the program is, but the number, I kind of think in my mind, the number should scale fairly equally. You're going to have a few percentage points to either side because every team's a little bit different.
Yeah. And you're not going to have the same consistency of team
you're not.
And all that. So yeah, sure.
Well, you don't know. You could put 0.75, multiply by 0.75 the budget, fund a new team with that money, and they could outperform the original team for all you know.
It can happen. Sure.
Yeah. So you don't know what you're going to get, but the outcome you're looking for is, I want to deliver, 75% more features over and above what I'm doing now. So the management of that on paper should be easy. My team's budget times 0.75, that's the additional amount of money I need.
Yeah, the math is the easy part. Trying to convince people to approve that budget is a different kettle of fish altogether.
Well, listen, we have a new rule on the Agile podcast. It's when you start talking about budgeting, we're done. Oh man, it's all fun and games until all the viewers go away when you start talking about budgeting.
I'm sure there's plenty out there. Thank you to both of you who hung around.
Yep, or French classism, or German educational.
That was,
we were all over the place today.
We were.
Yikes. Well, thank you for the 2 people that are still watching.
Checks in the mail.
Yep. Agile Podcast questions, Gmail. Or comment. That's a better way to do it. Comment.
Let us know what's of interest to you. We'll see what we can do.
Taylorism, like anything.
We may even bring in some experts.
Maybe.
Maybe.